I'm Don Dickson, and I want to thank you for joining me again today. I have a short little message for you this morning. Just yesterday, we had a vlog on mapping a hump, and we were intertwining some video that was shot from a film that I made quite a few years ago. And it was an integral part of our story of what I was trying to get across to you yesterday. Now, like we do every time we put out a video, we proof it right before we send it off to YouTube. And I was so busy the rest of the day, I didn't bother to make sure that it was running and all of that, but I did sort of check on it around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. 3 o'clock, I think it aired around 2, and about 4 o'clock, I took a look just to see, make sure it was, on the air and all of that. And when I started viewing through it, much of the video from our earlier film that was intertwined, that was part of telling this whole entire story about this hump and how to map a hump, wasn't there. It was gone. I almost had a minor heart attack. I didn't get that at all. I didn't understand. And by the way, in case you don't know, my wife she's a media person. She's absolutely a genius. She never makes mistakes. I mean, never. I'm prone to making mistakes, but she is not. And this was something that just happened. We didn't know really how to figure it out, but we had at least 100 people, maybe 120 people that viewed it. And it must have been confusing to them because in the end, what I was saying didn't match up with what was supposed to be there. So I thought I'd at least inform you of that. So if you were one of those first 100, do me a favor. We, of course, re-edited, went in and put it back in for today. So starting at 2 o'clock today, voting day, it's going to be rerun with all of the proper stuff. So if you want one of those first 100, go back and view it again, and maybe you'll understand a little better. I'm sure you will. So with that being said, I got to thinking yesterday, after all of that nonsense took place, about this little short story that I'm going to share with you this morning. It happened at the summer school years ago, but it just so happened that it was on a hump. Now, the reason I want to tell you this little short story about this hump was because it brings up another situation. If you're an early student on this mapping and interpretation, you're just beginning, you're going to run into this situation more often than someone who's really experienced like me or some of my more experienced guys. You're going to run into it, or at least you're going to be presented with an additional little problem. And this particular hump up at our summer school was a prime example how it can happen even to me. Now, the mapping doesn't change. You map exactly how we've laid it out to this point. But your interpretation sometimes can be a little difficult. You can't seem to interpret where my longest, narrowest, sharpest, deepest break to the deepest water is. You're unable to arrive at the contact point. So I wanted to tell you this little short story to give you an answer for when that situation occurs. I'm going to tell you how to handle it. But let me tell you this little short story. We were mapping with a group of students like we normally would. And this was a rather advanced class. I had about 50 advanced people. So I was taking different handfuls at different times, and we'd go out and we're doing a lot of mapping. I wasn't spending a lot of time that week on presentation of lures because these people were pretty advanced people. They already knew pretty much how to present a lure. So we were spending most all of our on-the-water time in this area of mapping. And we had mapped, I believe that morning we had mapped a saddle. Not my main saddle, but a different saddle. And we showed procedures in mapping a saddle. And as we were returning at lunchtime, we were arriving about a half hour before lunch was scheduled. And one of my students mentioned to me that there's this hump that's close to our lodge that I didn't use much in my training or in my fishing, actually. And I had sort of kind of forgot about it almost, even though it was close to our lodge. And it was a hump that we had mapped it, and my partner and I, and we referred to it as Star Hump. And I hadn't been there for quite a while, and as we were pulling up, the one guy said, you know, we're a half hour early for lunch. He said it'd be fun to just go map that, do a quick map of that Star Hump that your partner was telling us about. See what that looks like, since we have some experience now. Let's go look at that, and then be right before we go into lunch. I said, well, okay, it'd have to be quick now. We've got to go map it quick and show you what's there. So we go into this mapping little process, and I'm going to draw it out for you. I don't have a film of this. I'm just going to draw it for you. But before I do that, I'm going to show you a picture of what it looks like on the contour map. This is the map I used when I first went up there, and when Buck said go map 25 miles worth of stuff. And this is what this particular hump looked like, Star Hump, on the map. Now, after I show you that, I'm going to pull up now Navionics. This is how Star Hump looks on Navionics. Keep in mind, I'm trying to point out to you that these maps, whether it's electronic or whether it's the paper map, these maps won't give you the details that you need to properly interpret a structure, or it won't give you the ability to fish it properly just by looking at what we're seeing here on these maps. So I'm going to tell you the story, and then I'm going to draw you a picture of what it really looks like, a detailed map of it. So we raced right into Star Hump. Now, in this case, we didn't need to do the crisscross pattern to find the shallowest spot, because the federales had actually put a red marker on top of this hump. And that's what they do when they have, you know, like right underneath the surface, there's like big rock or something, you know, that's a danger to your prop. So they had this red marker there, and we knew that's the shallowest spot. It's about 1 foot. So we didn't have to find the shallowest spot. We just had to establish, does it lead to deep water? So we just took any old angle and went right off. And sure enough, it led to 49 feet of water. And as we were going off, we were watching where it broke. Now, this particular hump had a few break lines on it. Shallow break line was around 14 feet, as I recall, and then the next break line was around 22 or 24 feet. I can't remember exactly. It's been a long time. But about that. That was the medium, and actually what I considered the primary break line. And then the final break line into deep water was occurring at between 35 and 37 feet. Into 49, as I recall this, 49 feet of water was the deepest. The reason I recall it's an odd number, but this was a hump that had 49 feet of water all the way around, as it turned out. That's the reason I remember that number. So here we have a hump. We've established it leads from the shallows to the deep, and the final break of that hump was occurring at 35 feet. So one pass off, we got up close to that marker, and we just drove off the structure, and we established real quick it bled all the way, and it had a good final break at 35 feet. So we know the structure will produce. So the next step, of course, getting on the primary break line, following it all the way around the hump. Remember, it's a hump all the way around the hump, getting the size and shape. Now, that primary break line was about 22, 24 feet. So that's what we were following to establish our size and our shape. In most all of our fishing, we're looking for one particular feature sometimes that'll give us the spot. Sometimes we'll have a couple of features, and then we'll have to determine. But in the case of some of the structure up there, like I've already shared with you, some had 3 or 4 features. And then we come to Star Hump. So as we were following that rascal around, let me tell you, I came to a swing out like that, and instantly when it turned back in, I said, man, there's a sharp finger right there. That could be the contact point right there. And then I went about another 10 yards, and ooh, there was another one. Turned out just as sharp, turned back in the same way. Wow, that could be it too. So I went a little bit further, and here's another one, just like that, and turned back in. I said, man, I got 3 real pretty close to each other that could be the contact point. All 3 of them have good possibilities. Now, in the meantime, what was funny about this is I had like 3 or 4 boats following me. It looked like we were trying to run through some kind of maze out there. We just kept turning in and out, in and out, in and out. By the time we had finished that number 1 pass of following the break line to see the size and the shape, We had thrown 6 markers. 6. So, like I say, most of the time we're looking for one good feature. In this case, we had 6 features. And at the first glance, as we were making that pass, they all seemed to be about the same as the other. And that's how, of course, this structure got its little pet name we had for it, star hump. Now, that created a problem for us when it comes to the interpretation. So now, you know we have to take soundings, but now we have to take soundings literally off of 6 markers because they all led to 49 feet of water. There was 49 feet all the way around this bar. So as we started taking these soundings, and then we went off the second, and then we went off the third feature, and then we went off the fourth, and the fifth, and the sixth, then we can come back in after we had marked all the depths. We got back in there. Now, I've done this in about 15, 18, 20 minutes at this point. We're 10 minutes away from lunch, so I said, let's interpret this thing. So we went in and we drew our maps. And then I drew my map. I looked at all of the soundings that I had taken. And guess what? They all looked identical. It looked like somebody took, a Christmas cookie and just stamped it out, and every star feature looked exactly like the other one. You couldn't tell any difference. So I said, ooh. Even I didn't see any difference. And I've mapped thousands of structures, my friends. And I can always see a little difference here or there. You can always pick it out. There's always a little something. But in this case, I couldn't see it. And I know that my students couldn't see it. They said, what do we do now? They all look the same. What do we do? I said, you guys sit here. I'm going to go on off these features again myself, which I did. And I came back in and I said, folks, I'm going to be honest with you. I could fib to you, which I would never do, of course, but I could pretend like I know, but I don't. I can't tell. They all look the same. They all reaching out. Remember now, what's our key to the contact point? The longest, narrowest, sharpest, deepest break to the deepest water in the area. Well, the deepest water in the area is the same all the way around, 49 feet. And they all broke at 35 feet. Final break, 35, 35, 35, 35, 35. So now that's not it. So now what? Well, which one breaks the sharpest? Well, as I looked at how I marked my depths, it looked like they all broke with the same sharpness. Confounding at this point. So then what? Okay, what's left is what one of these star fingers reaches out the furthest. They were all the same. There was no difference. You could have put a tape measure on them. They're all the same. I could not figure it out. So that's the reason I'm telling you this story, one of the reasons I'm telling you. And then I'm going to tell you, when you run into that, and like I say, if you are a beginning mapper, you may not be able to interpret what you're seeing. You maybe have a good map, but can't quite interpret it. Where someone like me who's done it so many times, I can come in, look at your map, and go ahead and interpret it from what you were showing me. So you get better and you learn and learn and learn. But you're going to run into that where you've made your map, you know the size and the shape, you know it'll produce, you've done a lot of good work, but you can't actually pinpoint the spot, that last spot, or the very first spot where the fish see the contact point. You can't figure it out. Well, here is my instruction to you when that occurs. Fish it all. Fish every part of that structure. Trolling and casting. Cover it all. After I gave them the instruction, when you run into that and you can't determine where the contact point is, fish the entire structure. You know what it looks like, and so you know how to best fish it. So just go ahead and fish it. Let the fish tell you where they're making contact, and eventually they will. They'll show you the spot if it's your home lake. Now, what I did that day, and this was a tag into this story, and I want to show you the actual detailed map I made of this structure. So you can see how it differs from Navionics, how it differs from the actual paper map. And now at least, no matter what, we could fish it. But as I was sitting there with the students, I said, you know, on that second time through on my soundings that I just went and took, I said, I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm not going to say for sure. But if you made me say or made me choose at this point, which one of these fingers, if you had to make just one series of casts checking your slower speeds, which one would it be? Now, I had a sighting on this one hump, and I said, if I had to choose, I would choose this one, and here's what I'm going to tell you the reason why. I'm not positive because I don't have all of the electronic perfect gear and size and the distances and all of that to absolutely be sure, but it appeared to me that that one right there, where I had marked an X on your map here, it appeared to be breaking a little bit sharper. It got into 49 feet a little bit quicker than the rest of them did, which would denote that it's breaking a little bit sharper. Not a big difference, but a little. I said, but in real life, if I was here fishing this and my goal was to catch fish, I'd fish the entire hump. I'd fish it all. And there's a little tag into this story that I want to share with you. There was a fellow from Iowa. I think he's moved since, I think twice, but at the time he was from Iowa. And he wanted to catch a big walleye. He had been reading and studying for 4 or 5 years. He was a serious structure fisherman. But he had never caught a 10-pound walleye, and he wanted to catch one in the worst way. So in all his free fishing time, he was fishing my deep saddle and all the stuff where a lot of big fish are being caught. And he was one of the guys that mapped that hump with me. So during lunch, of course, we're talking fishing, and there's a whole lot of subjects being brought up, you know, by the other students. And one of the guys that had come in with me that had just done that star hump said, hey, where's Dave? I don't see him here at lunch. Now, this is one of the fellows that was with us out there on Star Hump. And sure enough, he wasn't in the lunchroom. So I just hollered out, who was riding with Dave? And it was this Jimmy C, I think, was riding with Dave. And he said, no, we came in. He said, I crawled out of the boat and came on up, and I don't know what happened to him after that. So after lunch, we went down to the dock, and on our way down there, you know, I have another group of fishermen that were going to be going out with me in the afternoon. So we're walking down, we get down to the dock, well, we got a bunch of boats in there, and all of a sudden, I see a boat coming in, about 100 yards out, coming into the dock, and here it was Dave. So I said, well, listen, we missed you at lunch. We were hoping that you didn't have engine trouble or anything. Is everything all right? He said, oh, yeah. And he said, you know, I was fascinated with that star hump. He said, I couldn't get over how identical those features looked. So I went back over them a few times, and I was just taking another look. I wasn't all that hungry anyhow the day, and I said, well, okay. I said, did you find out anything different? He said, one thing I did. I did find out something different. He said, you know, when we left there, you said if you had to, if you were pressed into it, you had to say, where would I make my cast if I could only choose one? You showed the sighting and said the one that you thought might be it, but you weren't sure. But that's where you'd cast if you were pressed to pick one. He said, so I anchored down my boat, and I sat there and I cast that thing for the better part of a half hour. And I said, well, did you catch a fish? He said, yeah, I caught one. So Dave Bishop comes up out of the live well with his first 10-pounder that he caught on the cast. So we pretty much now know where that contact point is, but it was really the fish that gave it away. And not only was it a fish, but it was a great fish. So it's a great story, but I still remember that, and he was so tickled. You know, it was a big day for him. But I wanted to share that story with you for this reason. In your beginning efforts in mapping, if you can't get, you know it'll produce, you set it up, it leads all the way, and it breaks at a good deep depth, you know it'll produce fish. Okay, once we did all that detail mapping and took our soundings, this is what it looked like. I'm showing you my drawing map of this structure. And if you look at it and try to interpret from what I'm showing you, my detail map, you're probably like me. You can't pick out the spot. You can't pick out the one. It just didn't show itself. But in the end, I had a hunch, but it wasn't a guarantee. But in the end, a 10-pound walleye showed us the spot. And hopefully that's what will happen to you. When in doubt, just go fishing that rascal, and many times the fish will give it to you. Thanks for being with me today. I appreciate you, and I hope you learned a little something today, a little something new. And I want you to follow us on Instagram, like us on Facebook, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We appreciate each and every one of you. We'll see you the next time.